Early voting in Arkansas is underway. Here to give us an update and tell you everything that you need to know is Secretary of State John Thurston. Hi there. Thanks for joining us on Conduit.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, it is underway, and according to the numbers that I just received from the crew for the first 3 days, what is today? Thursday.
Today's
Um,
Thursday.
um, we are at 165,209 have voted in the first 3 days, and that's trending about 20,000 above the first 3 days
In
of
2023.
2020. So people are motivated to vote
Yeah.
this year. That is for sure.
What do you think is behind that motivation and seeing such an uptick since 2020?
You know, obviously it's the presidential election. Um, that is the main draw, and it is
Yeah.
every general election. It's better turnout than an off year, and that's it. I think that's it. I think people realize that this is definitely every time everyone talks about every election being the most important, but this one certainly is
Yeah. Yeah.
a very, very important election.
I do think that a lot of not just Arkansans, but Americans feel like this we're really at a turning point with our nation, and this election is certainly the most important one. Are you an interesting message? We've talked about this is that in 2020, I vaguely remember, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Republican National Committee, those running for office, okay, go on election day, go vote then. And there really wasn't a big message or push for early voting amongst the Republican Party. I feel like that messaging has changed a bit. And have you seen even an uptick amongst Republican voters regarding early voting?
I think so because sometimes we don't call it early voting. We like to say the first day to vote. Uh,
Okay.
and the reason it's so nice and people are really enjoying it, and people are early voting more now than they did 8 years ago.
Hmm.
It's just keeps trending more and more people. I voted today. It wasn't anything
That's
special
you.
about
Yeah.
what it wasn't special about today. It was just the day that I was able to swing through, right, and do it.
Yeah.
So it's so much easier, so much more convenient now with the early day voting, and I think people are really enjoying that personally.
Yeah. Have you heard any reports from any counties or any polling sites yet about issues with voting?
Well, there's always something. There's always something.
Mhm.
There's always going to be small things, nothing
Yeah.
major. And of course, I may get in trouble for saying that just today we did find out that somewhere in Northwest there was a little bit of a issue with the poll books because of the voter turnout. The
Hmm.
poll books, because of the volume, was having a little bit of trouble keeping up. I guess there was a pause,
Wow.
say,
Yeah.
and so that's a new problem for us.
Yeah.
So many people are showing up to vote, and I guess that's a good problem. But
Yeah, it is a good problem. I was listening to some of Trump's rallies and he's had Tucker out there, RFK. That camp, they really talk about election integrity. And even so far as to talk about paper ballots, I listened to an interview once with Tucker Carlson, and he said, as long as our machines are fully online, we'll never have, full election integrity. They can always be compromised. And I know that there's an initiative here in Arkansas to allow for paper ballots. What are your thoughts on that? At times it seems like there's almost a concerted effort to push away from paper ballots here in Arkansas. But what are your thoughts?
So I would encourage folks that we have paper ballots. I mean, that's what is printed out for you out of the what we call the ballot marker, right? You no longer, at least in Arkansas, pencil in by the name that you're interested in. And so there's that paper, that hard document. And if I can, if we have time, I want to back up and give a little bit of the history of how we even got here, right?
Sure.
We didn't all of a sudden go to this equipment. Oh, got my hands going out like Mr. Trump there. Might be contagious, but anyway, so Secretary Mark Martin, which I would argue with anyone is probably one of the most conservative elected officials we've ever had. When he was secretary, he began this process with the vendor and the equipment that we currently have. He had a pilot program where 5 counties were on this equipment, tested it, gave their input and so forth. So when that pilot program was complete, they decided to go into, to begin purchasing this equipment for all the counties. One of the things that Secretary Martin did, which was tremendous foresight and wisdom, is he did not allow any modems to go into the tabulators. So and so he began that process. And since then, the legislatures passed a law that modems are not allowed. It's illegal to have them in the election equipment. So the ballot marker and the tabulator do not go online. In fact, it's against the law. So when I took office, there were 21 counties that have yet received the new equipment that we all have today because of the work that Secretary Martin did. And so I didn't just take the previous administration's word for it. We did our own, research. We actually put out some bids. We had a bidding process. We looked at other vendors to make sure, do we really have the best? And it was our conclusion that Secretary Martin did a great job. And so that then we continued on with the remaining 21 counties. And now all 75 have the same equipment. So,
Okay.
yeah, so that's,
sure.
yeah, I hope that answers a few of the questions.
Yeah, it does. And I think our viewers will appreciate that. I think what we hear often, especially, and you know this, coming out of 2020, sure, there's so many questions surrounding the election and the numbers. How would you put Arkansas voters in particular, their mind at ease when, they get their ballot printed out, and technically, yes, it is a paper ballot. They get it printed out and they see the selection, but then there's that barcode. How do you ease their mind that for people who have somewhat of a distrust now,
Sure.
that is accurate?
Yeah. Well, full disclaimer, I owe the vendor ES&S nothing. Okay. So yeah. I owe only the Arkansas people, our constituents. That's who I owe explanations to, and that's who I owe my allegiance, right? So the barcodes are simply a latitude, longitude reading where the candidates are on that ballot. And I'm not an IT person, so you'll have to bear with me. This is going to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's reading the line, right? So if John Thurston's on the ballot, he is in this race, line 1, whatnot. And that's what that barcode is reading. The good news, I want to encourage folks that because of the paper ballot that we have, there are audits that are performed. Now, some people would question, do we do enough auditing? Because the law that was passed at the State Board of Election does a hand count of 5% of the ballots cast, and that goes, it's in the primary and the general, and it has to be done with at least 15 counties. So there's a randomly drawn, each of those counties, a precinct hand counted to verify. And so, and in those audits, since the audits that I've been aware of, which now to date, hundreds of thousands of ballots have been cast in all of those audits, I can remember 2 ballots that were not counted correctly in those audits. Wow. Now, I want to encourage folks, there's nothing preventing the counties from doing their own audits. And in fact, the state board encourages that. There's nothing stopping the state board, or not state board, county commissioners from hand counting those ballots. And essentially performing their own audit.
And we did talk about this offline a bit. Let's say that someone in, Salem Springs does have an issue with their ballot, or they just feel, like, oh, something doesn't seem right. You mentioned there is a form at their polling site that they can access. Tell us about that.
That is right. So, and I'm looking for this website too. So if they want to file an actual election complaint, I'm sorry, give me just
Well,
So
and we can
there's,
include the website too.
okay, so there's a form that is at each polling site. And if there is something that they notice that the equipment did or didn't do, there's a form that they can fill out, and it's an official complaint about the equipment. Okay. If they have an election complaint, they see something going on, they're like, hey, I don't think that's right. There's a process that you file a complaint with the state board, and the website is www.arkansas.gov/SEVC. And
Okay.
there's a tab where you click and make that official complaint. There's investigations into it and so forth. So those are the two ways. If they have a problem with the machine, there's a form at the polling site, or there should be. There's supposed to
Okay.
be. And then that website's where you have an election complaint.
Okay. A few other questions about voting. I'm already seeing reports. I know our viewers are as well. You've probably seen it in your capacity. Other states are saying, well, we may not have things counted for days or even potentially weeks. And that is hard for me to understand how we are in 2024 and, they're already coming out and saying that. What are your thoughts on not having other states saying that they can't even have results? And how does that compare to Arkansas?
Well, I don't know their why unless they're doing a total hand count. And I'm not busting on the hand count process because I have never lobbied against the hand count, hand mark movement at all. I haven't called a legislature or a county clerk or anything. So don't misunderstand. But so in Arkansas on election night, you will see the results on our website, or you'll see the results on TV. And
Yeah.
those are what we call unofficial results. The official results are not certified, or they're not due until 15 days after the election, general election. During a primary,
Yeah.
it's 10 days.
Okay.
I would support 15 days in a primary as well, because then that would give you more time for a county if they did want to hand count
Yeah.
after
Okay.
uh, tabulation. But we should not have any problems with knowing our numbers, at least the unofficial numbers.
Okay. And then how is your office planning for particularly election day and there at the Capitol? What does that look for your office?
So we're primarily here, we're in just an advisory role, if you will, for the counties. The counties are the ones with the boots on the ground. They are the poll workers, election commissioners, and the county clerk's office. And I do want to add this for anyone listening. Take it easy on the poll workers. Okay,
Yeah.
They are good Arkansans doing their best, and they love our country. If you have, let me have it, let your legislatures have it. That's why we're elected to. We're here to let you give it to us, but don't do that to the poll workers. Just be
Sure.
with them. But that's really where it all takes place, and want to encourage people to take their ID. We're a voter ID state. If you forget your ID, you can vote provisional. However, you have to show up by noon the following Monday, somewhere in that time, and present your ID for your ballot to be counted. And
Okay.
another quick note: voterview.org is an important website for folks. You can
Mhm.
see your sample ballot, polling sites, and those sorts of things.
That has been so helpful, especially for me, not as conduit, but as Jenny Lauren. I will get so many texts. Oh, you keep up with this more than I do. And I literally am just
Right.
now just selecting all my pictures that I took of my sample ballot, and I'm just sending it to them so they know, because there are a lot of issues. And we can segue into this. There are the ballot issues, I think, right now. Not well, we're only down to two. We could talk about that third one, but particularly ballot issue two is it's confusing for people. Your office has been in the headlines quite often over the past few months over these different initiatives, whether it's been the Learns or abortion, most recently medical marijuana. Provide us an update on that. And then also, what would you say to those who question these decisions and would say, the Secretary of State is politicizing his office for a particular outcome that they want? What do you say to that?
Sure. Yeah, it has been I was probably the most sued individual in the state for the past few months, and it was because of these reasons. I can only tell you that we do our best to follow the law, and I want to. And of course, if people have a right to believe whatever they want to believe. However, that's the reason we have the three branches of government. You have the legislative branch who passes the laws, makes the laws, the executive branch who does our best to carry it out. If we make a mistake or we miss it, that's the reason for the courts.
Yeah.
And so the abortion issue was something that we interpreted the law, meaning they did not turn in the proper paperwork at filing. So the law says shall not count. So we sent a letter to the sponsor saying, we're not counting because of this reason you didn't turn in proper paperwork. So then it goes to the courts. Supreme Court ruled in our favor that we were right. And so it's not on the ballot. And so that is, and I tell folks, there's no room for advocacy in this office when it comes to things like that. And there was an online comment, someone was really letting me have it over the marijuana deal. And I said, if your logic and your accusations were anywhere close to being right, then why in 2022 did I certify the medical marijuana to the ballot? And of course they didn't know what to say because they did it right. And of course,
okay.
So we do our best. And these amendments, they're emotionally charged. I get it. I mean, people are upset or they feel strongly. And when it doesn't go their way, they're emotional about it. And they all of a sudden think that we've had this big agenda trying to stop it based on our political ideology, which you can't do. That's the reason the courts are in place.
Yeah.
So.
You mentioned being sued in lawsuits. Something that Conduit has followed has been closing the primaries, and then, of course, the lawsuit regarding the Republican Party of Arkansas. Can you give us a status on that or an update?
Well, I really, really can't. As we were visiting, I'm not too up to date. I personally have been dealing with these other ones, and of course, when there's pending litigation, my folks always say don't comment, and so. No, I think as far as the closed primary, just from my Secretary of State position, I can say this: we received, one letter from one individual, another letter from another that were opposite things, and so as far as I'm concerned, I think that's a party. The party needs to work that out and get on the same, whatever the page is, get on the same page, and then tell the state, unify, okay, this is what the party wants. And so that's kind of where at least I am on that. And that's from the Secretary of State's position,
Okay.
They're like, once the party gets that worked out, just let us know.
Some would argue that they did, right? So some would argue that they did work that out, that, over 500
I agree.
delegates made that decision. So it'll be certainly interesting to watch. Okay, we'll switch gears just a little bit before I let you go. You yourself are on the ballot. You're in a three-way race for Arkansas Treasurer. Give us an update, if you can, about that.
Yeah, sure. So it's a low profile race going on right now because all the eyes are on the presidential race. But it's going well. It's very important who is elected. It's essentially the state's bank. And of course, the reason I have the experience that I do have is because of Arkansans. And I said this on a radio show the other day. Thank you, Arkansas, for even allowing me to have experience in government. I wouldn't have it without them. And so they have trusted me for 14 years. And I've over the years, I guess if you added up all the taxpayer dollars that I've been responsible for, it's hundreds of millions. I've been managed hundreds of employees in state government. And over the years, there's never been any fraud, any mishandling of taxpayer dollars. And so I think, that's someone you want in the treasurer's office, just someone they're going to get in there do their job, and, make sure everything reconciles each day, right? So
Absolutely.
that's what I look
Yeah.
forward to.
Okay, let's just make an assumption and say that you do win for this position. Tell our viewers in what would happen to your current position in the Secretary of State's office, and what would that look like in filling that seat?
Sure. And that was one of the hardest things for me when I decided to run for treasurer, is because of what I'm about to explain. Because if I do win, I will be leaving halfway through my last term. So I'm in my last term now. When Mark Lowry passed away, it was unexpected, at least to me and many others. And because of the timing of it, the law says that the next replacement will be chosen or elected at the next election, which is where we are today. If Treasurer Lowry would have been with us another month, then the appointed one by the governor would have finished the complete term. And I was already kind of looking at that office. I have an economics degree. I love the world of finance. I'm not necessarily an expert, but I love it. Obviously have experience in the constitutional office. And so there was a unspoken assumption that Mark was going to run for secretary, and that I had my eyes on that already. So that's where we are today. If elected, then the governor would appoint someone to finish this term. That appointed person cannot run for the secretary's office after that, when it becomes, I guess, an open seat in 2 years. So
lots of names being floated around for that appointment. Who would you recommend?
Oh, that's a good question, but I don't know. I've heard the names fly around too. Thankfully, the governor has not told me any names.
Okay.
I'm glad she hasn't, because I think it's probably pretty much inappropriate, since we haven't even had the election.
Yeah.
But
you got a plan just in case, and so
that's true. That's true. But she has not told me a thing, and I'm thankful for that. So I could just remain ignorant right now on that one.
Or plead the fifth, one of the two.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else that you would want our viewers to know before we let you go?
Well, just make sure you vote.
Yeah.
Right. And and all the issues that we just discussed, whatever it is, whether it's the equipment, whether it's closed primary, whatever it is. I mean, that's the reason you stay engaged, right? And also, you need to also know that in government and politics, things don't happen overnight. You need to play the long game, no matter what your goal is, right? There's a scripture says, don't get weary in well doing.
Yeah.
And then also, don't beat each other up, figuratively or literally, in this process.
I'm not going there, Thurston.
Don't do that in this in whatever the long game, whatever we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And remain unified as a country, and even as a party, because we're both Republicans. And again, just stay involved. Stay involved for sure.
I wholeheartedly agree. Really, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. I know that your office has a lot going on right now, and so appreciate it, and hope that you come back on again soon.
All right. Well, thank you.